Kia ora, bros, and welcome back to a very special episode of Retro Pop Planet. And this video is about 13 years in the making. Truly an epic adventure. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than some of my traditional filming locations because you see, this is primarily going to be my memories and a pictorial tour of some of the filming locations for Lord of the Rings in the South Island, the Queenstown area of New Zealand. I had the great privilege of working a conference with my last job back in the spring of 2012, and we had our own epic adventure to New Zealand. We worked with the Office of Tourism to set up this conference for all of our attendees, and I was there about 2 weeks total. 1 week for the conference, and then me and a couple friends from work, we stayed on about a week extra. Now, the reason I'm doing this as pictures and not video is because, well, this is before I was really all that active on YouTube. I did have a camera. It was very poor, and I have only one video from that time because this is back when I think I only had like an 8 gigabyte card, and also I think I had a 16 gig, but you know, you take as many photos as I did on this trip and I filled it up pretty quickly. Plus a lot of them were filled up with work. We were there to work. I mean, this was primarily a trip just for business. And of course I was stoked to go here because, well, I've been obsessed with Lord of the Rings almost my entire life, almost as long as I've been obsessed with Star Wars. And it really started with the Ralph Bakshi, first The Hobbit, and then this Lord of the Rings, which, spoiler alert, when you get to the end of the movie and Gollum climbs up on top of Frodo and bites his finger off, that's probably one of the most terrifying scenes. It gave me nightmares. And then when I was around 8 or 9, I read The Hobbit, and this is still my original copy. I got this from a Scholastic book fair. And a couple years later, I dove deep. I got the entire series of Lord of the Rings, and this is the 50th anniversary edition from, I believe, 1989. Also, a little bit of backstory about me. My mom is from Oxford, England. So growing up, we would take family vacations to Oxford. And of course, this is where J.R.R. Tolkien worked as a professor through the university, the college system in Oxford. He lived there almost his entire life, and then he died in Oxford, and he's actually buried in Oxfordshire. So my reference point might be a little different than some, because growing up around these beautiful English gardens, these craggy old stone buildings, cozy pubs, I mean, everything that he wrote about and that he loved, with extra flourishes of fantasy, are all in these books. And Peter Jackson just took it to a completely different level by taking that, setting it in a country which is very familiar seeming, but also is completely alien and otherworldly. So one of the reasons why I don't think I'm going to be getting back there anytime soon is that my flight alone, economy class, was like $6,500. And getting there is a complete bear. I live on the East Coast of the United States, and so we had to fly through Los Angeles, and we were in LAX for several hours, I believe, and then we took the night flight to Auckland, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 or 13 hours. We had a 3-hour layover at the Auckland airport, and then it is another 3-hour flight to the South Island. All told, getting there, I think, was around 22, 23 hours, something along those lines. It might have been a full day. Getting home was almost 2 days. That's a different story. But the entire trip, if I'm being honest, counting in what the office paid for, plus the week extra that I stayed, was about $10,000, and that's US dollars. And the exchange rate at that period was not very favorable to the US, and it's a very expensive town. Flying into Queenstown, a lot of people that I was with remarked that it's very similar to Aspen. You actually fly in over the Southern Alps. I was dozing off on the plane, and the pilot goes over the loudspeaker and basically says, "Welcome to Middle Earth," which I geeked out over. And you look over and it's just nothing but beautiful white-capped mountains. And then you end up in lush countryside, and then you're back in the mountains, and you have this gorgeous body of water, so amazing. And then you land, and you're basically coming through like a ravine almost. You're coming through the mountains, and then they drop you, and it's a pretty steep drop, and next thing you know, you're on the ground. And then when you get out in the airport, you're just walking on the tarmac, and there's barely any terminal to speak of. Customs took like 2 seconds, and then we're out on the street with our rental car, finding our way to the hotel. And the hotel that we stayed in was basically a resort. Me and 2 other guys that I was with got our own separate villa, which was like $2,000 a night, cresting this hill, overlooking the water. And then in the background was the misty mountains, the Remarkables. And boy, are they ever remarkable. And honestly, some of the dated CGI in the movies don't really do it justice when you're actually there in person. The physical presence is very awe-inspiring. And we were there at the end of February. It was basically the end of February, and it was a little bit chilly. They were passing through their summer months, so we were basically entering into fall. And I was actually unprepared for how cold it was going to be on a couple of the nights. I didn't quite dress properly. And the first few days that I was there, I got a little ill. But this was the view from our team room, and a lot of the coworkers back home were, I think they were starting to get a little jealous because they were sending us like funny memes over Facebook and basically tagging us in photoshopped pictures. And my buddy, who was our videographer and the official photographer for the conference, him and I both got tagged in this photo, and you'll recognize this. It's from the Two Towers, and it's the scene where they're overlooking the gates of Mordor. And I got photoshopped in as Samwise Gamgee, and my buddy got photoshopped in as Frodo Baggins. And so what did we do? Well, we decided to take a funny photo of our own. So we really didn't have to do all that much. I had the idea to actually take some of the bathrobes from our rooms, and we had these shower caps that, you know, we never used, but I thought it would be kind of funny to take the shower cap, take the bathrobes as our cloaks, and then go out in front of the real Misty Mountains, kneel down by this rock on the property. Then he photoshopped in another rock to make it look like we were leaning on it. It would have been cool if there was actually a golem there. It would have been kind of funny if we would have added that as well. So it was like the second night that we were there where we went to Arrowtown. Arrowtown was basically a gold rush town, a gold mining town. Very similar to the American West. There was a gold rush in New Zealand, and a lot of the rivers around there had been panned for gold, and they were coming up, you know, they were striking it rich. And so Arrowtown was built up to cater to a lot of the local miners. It's a really funky little town that had some really great little restaurants. We ate out one night, and I remember walking down the street, walking off this huge meal that we had, and we passed a public park, and we walked down there a ways, and clear markings showed that this was a filming location for Lord of the Rings. Now, I knew that they did tours of Lord of the Rings because I had picked up the Lonely Planet guidebook before I went away on the trip, and they actually showed the company and they gave the phone number, and I knew that I was going to do that towards the end. It was cool because I got to see a location before we had even finished the conference. Another cool thing is that in the Lonely Planet book, they mentioned that there was a prominent cab driver who could be spotted around town, and he was about 7 feet tall. Now, he was cast as one of the Uruk-hai. He apparently would love to give his stories. Now, remember, Queenstown is not a very big town. You would see this guy quite often, according to the guidebook. And he was so large that he would have the seat was actually removed from where he would sit as the driver, and then the other seats were around him, and he would be back pretty far back in his seat just to accommodate his large size. And I don't know which one he is, but going back and watching Fellowship of the Ring, I do believe he might be the archer that is at the end of the movie, because that is the largest guy in that scene. And the primary Uruk-hai was an actual actor who played multiple roles throughout Lord of the Rings. And this taxi driver man was just an extra. I do know that one of my coworkers actually took a ride into town, and he happened to be the driver. So I was geeked out on that. I never never saw him. And then also reading some other people that had gone on different tours. Because it was locally shot and they used extras from the town and they used livestock that was nearby or they were borrowed from ranchers, some of these tours that were on horseback actually were horses that were used as the rower in. They were actually used in the movie, which again is such a cool thing. So throughout the conference, because we were working with the Department of Tourism, we had all these events each night or during the day that our members could go off and go, like a jet boat down the Shadover River, 360-degree canyon swings, and then also the bungee jump, which is reported the first place that bungee jumping was recorded in the entire country. And I believe that is also the Shadover River. And then I stayed for about 4 days or so after the conference ended. My two buddies, we had to move into the local YMCA because we couldn't afford the $2,000 a night villa any longer. So we got cast off into a room that we shared with some other people. And even that was like 100 Kiwi bucks a night. And then I finally got to do my geek tour of Lord of the Rings. I can't remember if I booked this through a travel office in town or if I called them or if I did it online. Their information is everywhere and I've looked them up and they are still out there and they still do these tours. The company I used was Nomad Safaris and they operate the Safari of the Scenes tours. I went with the Queenstown Lord of the Rings tour, which was for 4 hours. Here's a quick look at the tour highlights, and here's the full itinerary. Feel free to pause the video to read it in full. They also offer a 4-hour Glenorchy tour and a 9.5-hour full day Lord of the Rings tour. I was scheduled to meet them in the middle of town at a certain time. I think it started around noon, so I knew I was gonna have to get something to eat, so I found this little cafe right on the water and I got a huge breakfast burrito. And then I just stood around taking photos outside waiting for the tour. And when the guy arrived, it was obvious it was the tour. Plus there was a couple folks with me. I couldn't get any of my friends to go with me on this particular trip. So the guy rolls up in a Land Rover Defender with a snorkel. I knew we were gonna be in for some fun. I didn't realize exactly how rugged it was gonna get. But as he picks us up and he starts explaining how the tour is going to work and we start driving through town, I realized that you really do need a tour guide because some of these locations are very, very inaccessible just for the regular traveler. Also, Peter Jackson scouted a lot of these locations from the air, and in order to get the actors up in the morning, they would sometimes have to get up at 4 into the makeup chair and then they would helicopter them to a location. Just driving around to these different locations, we knew that we were probably only going to see maybe 5 or 6 within a 4-hour window, which I was perfectly okay with because when you see some of these locations, it's pretty impressive. The first stop was right up Queenstown Hill, and from there we got a view of Deer Park Heights. The refugees of Rohan and the Battle of the Warg scenes from the two towers were shot here. Our guide showed us a picture of the scene, but at this point it had been about 10 years since I had seen the movie, and I had a difficult time remembering the details of the scene. But I took this photo. It looks as if the digital effects crew removed Queenstown and the airport from those scenes. Traveling from Queenstown Hill, we stopped at a couple of scenic spots on our way to the next filming location. I'm going to unintentionally mispronounce this next word several times, but we headed off to the Kawaru Bridge Bungee, which I first went to as part of an evening event for my work conference. We then stopped at a road that led down to the Chard Farm family vineyard. The Otago Valley is best known for their winemaking operations. The actor Sam Neill also has a winery in this area. I believe Chard Farms are by appointment only, but since that wasn't part of the tour, it was on to the next filming location in the Kawaru Gorge. If you're a fan of the movies, you'll instantly recognize this as the Argonath, or Pillars of the Kings. The two pillars were CGI, but the actors did boat down the Shadover River. That intense blue color of the water is due to the light rays reflecting off of the unique mineral content of the riverbed. It is staggeringly beautiful in person. Filming also took place down along the bank here. At the time of my visit, there wasn't a good way down this massive gorge, but I have read that a river trail has since been constructed, so who knows, maybe it's possible to see this spot up close. We then made our way to Arrowtown, which, as mentioned previously, I had already visited. Our tour guide gave us some local information about the gold mining operations around this area, and then we made our way over to the filming location for the Gladden Fields. This is where Isildur was ambushed and then betrayed by the One Ring. Filming took place up and down this trail and into the woods. I believe they also shot some of the scenes of Arwen and Frodo escaping on horseback from the Nazgul on their flight to Rivendell. The tour guide turned onto a gravel road and the trip got gnarly. We followed an old gold mining road and crossed the Arrow River many times. At one point the river was so high that water was splashing over the front hood, hence the need for the engine snorkel. When we finally pulled over to get out, I was standing along a stunning riverbed and knew instantly where we were. The Fort of Bruinen. That scene is so pivotal to the event in Fellowship of the Ring that Peter Jackson needed to find a location that matched Tolkien's exact description. According to our guide, the scouting department had originally found a site on the Shotover River, but the water was too fast and high for the horses and stunt crew. The Arrow River was chosen because its depth varied from ankle to knee, with the rest being created using CGI. This stop also served as our official break as we were more than halfway through the tour. Remember when I said it was cold the first week of the trip since it was the beginning of fall? Well, this week was hot. Temperatures were climbing into the high 80s. Down on the river, it was a lot cooler. It wasn't just our tour in the area either. Many people were out hiking along the many trails that run through here. We were served much needed drinks, and then we tried our hand at gold panning. I've done something similar in New Mexico many years ago and wasn't expecting to find much, but the couple I was with pulled out a little nugget that was estimated to be worth $5 at the end of the tour. We then stacked back into the Defender and headed off to the final stop. From here we traveled to the entrance of Skipper's Canyon. Unrelated to anything from the movies, this location was the most Middle-earth feeling of all the places we visited. The views from here are incredible. Nomad offers tours of just Skipper's Canyon because it is so scenic. Skipper's Road was cut by hand by gold miners and is the one road in all of New Zealand that isn't insurable by rental car agencies. We parked nearby to Lighthouse Rock to take in the incredible vistas. I should mention that parts of X-Men Origins were also filmed in Otago and in Deer Park Heights. We climbed back into the rover and drove back to our starting point in Queenstown, thus ending the tour. So after about 4 hours, we ended up back where we started, and our guide was fantastic. I had a really lovely time. It's a great experience. And at the end of the tour, I got this guidebook. I can't remember if this was in a gift store or what, but this is completely updated edition. There might even be another version for The Hobbit, but this is by Ian Brody and it's actually signed by the author. This has all the information you need about each one of these locations. It talks about how they scouted it, things to do, where the actors hung out, what their favorite locations are, how they got there, etc. This is essential reading. Actually, all of it is essential reading. I'm midway through Fellowship of the Ring. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I've been wanting to tell this story for so long, and hopefully this helps you if you're going on a trip to New Zealand. Make time for these. If you're any kind of a Tolkien fan or a Peter Jackson fan or a Way to Workshop fan, there are still locations I would love to see. Hint, hint, anybody want to send me back over there? I'd love to take a trip. I thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave it a like. Please feel free to hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of different filming location videos on this channel. This might be the furthest one that I've ever done, and I'll see you guys in the next video.